Good morning, everybody. It's good to be here. I always love coming to Welland and hanging out. My family and I were normally in our Vineland community on Sunday mornings, which is great. But we also know a lot of you and just appreciate the community that we have here in Welland. And it's interesting, even as Kath is talking about the idea that we wanted to do Hope Lives, this annual series, again, more kind of scattered throughout the year as a reminder that this is more not just sort of a certain percentage of something that we do at one time of the year, but we do it all year round. We live in relationship. You as a community embody this so well, even in the rhythms of our Friday nights, year-round, let's share meals together and just bridge the gaps between our differences. And I just absolutely love that. And I think that that's such a great reflection of that same heart. And really appreciate being able to be here together with you today. Now, I don't know everybody here, but I do know some of you here. One thing I know is that this is a creative community, and I know we've got actually a lot of handy people in the community. Is there anybody here who would consider themselves a handy person? Is there anybody? I bet there's some people who are not wanting to admit it right now, but I don't consider myself. Some of us, I'm like mildly, I pretend to be handy, but I know we've got a lot of that in this room here, right? Some who have even if you've painted, you need a new color scheme, you've painted your house, painted a room in your house or just a wall, or you've gone and maybe retiled your bathroom. Something like that. Some of you here, I know, you've renovated an entire house and you've been able to do that. There's a variety of skills here in this room. And you'll know that a part of the process of these types of movements in doing some kind of fixing up in our houses is just the hope that regardless of our individual stylistic preferences, that we'll put together a finished design in the thing that we're building and renovating, it's gonna resonate with people. It's gonna be cohesive, it's gonna be comfortable, it's gonna be aesthetically appealing. And I know I've had moments where it's felt like I've kind of got that right, done this thing in our house. I'm like, yeah, I thought about that. Or my wife Taryn had thought about that and told me, hey, why don't we try that? And now I've tried to do that, and it kind of worked. But I've definitely also had some moments where I've finished it, and maybe even before I've quite finished it, I'm like, no, this is not working. Or I've finished it and thought it did, and then stepped back and be like, that does not work at all. Has anybody ever had one of those moments? Okay, so a while back, there was a thread that came up on my phone that kind of highlighted some of these design choices that people have made in their homes that were, shall we say, interesting. I'm sure you've seen some of these threads before. So here are some examples to show you what I mean. So this seems like a pretty nice house, right? It's got high ceilings. It's got a nice recessed feature, which is beautiful. The design work is really nice there. But they didn't quite hit the bullseye. I don't know what it seemed like they were really going for here. So that was one. The next one. This, depending on how much you like to multitask, this may not actually be a bad thing. So I'm just saying, but it's interesting. It's interesting. Let's check out our next one. This one, here's the thing, stained glass, awesome. Open concept, awesome. Accessibility, awesome. All of these things are really what you want. But somehow, I don't know if this is exactly what I'd be going for. It's a little bit too open concept, maybe. Okay, let's see the next one. Okay, this one here, to be honest, I don't think I'm diagnosably claustrophobic, but this legitimately makes me sweat the more that I look at this picture. It's a bad picture, but that's terrible. Okay, the next one. Here's the thing though with this one. I don't know how they got to the place where they got, but the decision was kind of made for them. However they got there, they did the thing that you had to do, which was cut that slot out so that the door would open and close. So at some point they made the choice, you know what, we have no choice, we're doing it. So good on them for that. And lastly, now this one actually looks very well finished. No, but hear me out. This one looks very well finished. I think it's a very clean setup and everything. But honestly, I'm kind of morbidly fascinated. How did this actually play out once they started using that? It's probably not funny, but that's a bit messed up. Sink, outlet, not a good idea together like that. We can all pretty easily identify in these kind of images, what the builder was probably aiming for. I think most of them we can at least identify what the builder was aiming for. But we can just as quickly see, based on our laughter, I think we all know we can pretty quickly see how it didn't add up. It just didn't quite make sense. It's a familiar feeling though, right? It's interesting. The Apostle Paul actually uses a construction metaphor that's pretty similar as he shares the opportunity that we're actually gifted with as followers of Jesus as a community. You know, in his letter to the church in Corinth, the first letter that he wrote, Paul wrote this. He said, "No one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what they've built, what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames." And throughout the Revelation series that we've been walking through these last few months, I don't know how it's been striking you, but I've been personally loving this series. And it's been clear, you know, in some of these imagery that's sort of interesting, and what does this all mean? And as we're being walked so well through this series, it's just so clear that everything points to Jesus. Everything points to Jesus. And there's reasons for the different ways and the different choices of words and imagery and language, but it points to Jesus, and that's so consistent. All of Scripture does, actually. It establishes Jesus throughout the Scriptures as this foundation for us, right? It's as his followers, that's the point. As a church community here at Southridge, that's the framework for everything that we not just believe, but everything that we hope and try to live out, and hope and encourage each other to live out. In Paul's description of Jesus as the foundation, you know, he explains what it looks like to respond to Jesus. If Jesus can be accurately described as a foundation to his followers, to us, then he comes, or should come, with a sense of anticipation for us, actually. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, I'm sure you've had these moments where you've passed through a job site, you've gone past a new place, and you've seen a foundation in the ground. You've seen they've dug it out and the foundation is being poured, and you're like, what are they going to build on there? What choices are they going to make? What's this going to look like? Well, there's this sense of anticipation. A foundation isn't the end point. They exist to be built on, and not haphazardly built on, where here's a foundation and let's kind of think about what we want to do with it. They're built on with a continuity, with the intention of continuity to be built on it. Our lives are meant similarly to be built on Jesus, and to have a foundation through to the structure, continuity, all the way up to the finishes. Hopefully not with an outlet in the sink. That we would have a continuity with who Jesus is as a good foundation. We believe in Jesus, and if we do, then we're invited, and we are actually building something on that foundation. Now, one way or another, that's going to be true. If I believe in Jesus, okay, well then I'm building my life. But the question is, what kind of life are we building on Jesus? You know, am I building in a way that's leading towards, you know, the off-centered chandelier? Not quite in line with sort of the intention. Not quite in line with a good foundation. Or am I building in continuity, start to finish? Am I being given the opportunity? Am I leaning into that chance to follow what Jesus has for my life? That's the same as him, as his foundation and the life that he lived. The work of building a life like that, that looks like Jesus, is often called discipleship, right? Sort of this Christian-y kind of language. But the idea of discipleship is not simply belief. Belief is a starting point, right? Belief is, you know, I believe these things about Jesus, and the idea that I've heard, and I'm starting to feel like there could be something in this. But belief could lead us in all kinds of different directions. And we only have to look as far as, to be honest, I mean, when you think of the placards held up by Christians maybe in pride parades, you know, proclaiming hatred in the name of Jesus, as one example, to realize that belief doesn't necessarily always lead to Jesus-like impact on the world around us. But discipleship is intentionally taking action to learn and exhibit the behaviors of Jesus, the actual behaviors of Jesus in our lives. You know, theologian Dallas Willard put it this way. He wrote, "If I'm Jesus' disciple, that means I am with him to learn from him how to be like him." With him to learn from him how to be like him. You know, he goes on to say that it's like learning from an instructor to play an instrument, right? A lot of people in this room have done that and do that. Or learning from a coach to play a sport. And for those who have done any of these things, you know that the being with, as Dallas Willard says, the being with quality of watching and hearing is an absolute necessity. Being together with somebody to learn from them is massive. And so then the question for us is, if that's what discipleship is being with Jesus to learn to live a life that looks like him, what does being with him look like? Without the embodied Jesus physically being in our presence among us like he was with his first disciples 2,000 years ago. Now, if Jesus' incarnation, which was not into the halls of power, but into an unremarkable place, full of people who are being dispossessed by those who are actually in the halls of power, if that doesn't do enough to demonstrate exactly where to find Jesus, then I think that the rest of his life, which is in continuity with that, I think it certainly does. This is something that we say a lot around here, but it seems that throughout all of the detailed descriptions of Jesus' life, that he disproportionately spent his time with the people who were not experiencing the care of his society. Jesus talks about the blessings of the poor while walking through the villages of Galilee, this backwater area, even within the area that he lived, and he's actively blessing the poor as well. He was known for sharing food and drink among others who ignored or even despised, food and drink among people who were ignored, rather, and despised by others. He was known as a friend of tax collectors and sinners. And throughout his time and his life, Jesus' attention shows us that the foundation that he's establishing of who he is one of love. Simply one of love, and especially towards the most vulnerable among us. Our neighbors who we are to love, not just, as we hear in the scriptures, not just like we love ourselves, although Jesus points to that, but Jesus actually ups the ante in his life, because first he says, love your neighbor as yourself. But later, towards the end of Jesus' life, he says, actually, I want you to love your neighbors the way that I have loved you. This is what we at Southridge believe, that being with Jesus and ultimately building on the foundation of Jesus looks like. Right now. When our community is experiencing various challenges in our midst, then we can believe that Jesus cares about whatever those challenges are: mental health, isolation, displacement, children in poverty, medical issues, addiction, inequity. I think it's fairly easy from learning about Jesus to believe that Jesus does care about that. But we don't begin to stabilize and then build our lives on the foundation of Jesus until we actually step in as well and get to know people who have those experiences, who are going through those things themselves. And until we begin to personally care and are so transformed ourselves as well. For our community here at Southridge, our attempt has been to respond specifically to, you've heard maybe about this in St. Catharines, to our friends and our neighbors experiencing homelessness. You've heard about in Vineland how we're leaning into relationship with community members who, out of necessity, are displaced to come here to work as migrant farm workers and then go back to their families and experience challenges here as well, to walk alongside them in community. And here in Welland, we're woven our lives in and out of each other's lives to understand that we have different needs. And even though we all have the same need for food, we don't always have the same opportunity to be resourced with food. And we have the same need for community, but we haven't always been raised in the same or find ourselves currently in the same space to experience the support of community. And we're leaning into that with each other. Our friends who are in these communities can experience things that we can believe are challenging, but we're not changed until we spend time in each other's presence and we get to be changed by each other. And our growing presence with each other causes us to share in each other's experiences. And that's how we are changed. That's how we give and receive and build together on this foundation of Jesus. Have you ever found yourself in one of those moments? Sometimes a very specific moment where you're experiencing that. Maybe being together, sitting together with somebody of an entirely different background or set of experiences than your own. but who you find yourself in that moment finding some kinship, identifying with each other. The sharing of a meal together and maybe realizing that regardless of our different financial situations or family dynamics or experiences growing up, that right now we both need a meal. And we can sit here and share that meal together. That I need you, actually, just as much as you need me. These moments, if you've ever experienced that and kind of been like, wow, there's something there. These moments are glimpses of God's kingdom. They're glimpses of actually being able to see this structure that's being built on the foundation of Jesus all around us. And this is something that's incredible because this is actually the act of creation, of co-creation with our Creator. Contrary to what the world believes is valuable, that believes is sustainable and shows something that's visible, these are the costly stones that Paul is talking about. The things that are actually surviving and will not burn away. God is gracious regardless of our actions. I think we know that. God is gracious. And honestly, even if we don't lean into living this way, we can still be in relationship with God, and legitimately know that we love Jesus, claim our love for Jesus, and that Jesus is our foundation. Paul says that if we build on the right foundation, but with hay or straw, which are not the best materials to be building with, the builder will suffer loss, but yet be saved, even as though one only escaping through the flames. Paul says it's survivable to build on this foundation without the right materials. But the thing is, what a missed opportunity that is. What a missed opportunity if we do that, to lose the investment of the work of our lives, the gift of our lives, and to find that it hasn't been a part of the eternal construction that God is inviting us to be a part of. We want to identify that right foundation. Who is this Jesus? Be intrigued by Jesus and get to know who he is. But we don't want to miss the chance to actually then build our lives on him. To participate in that ongoing act of creation that wasn't a one-time act by God, but actually continues, and we get to be invited to be a part of that. That's what we'd like to do together. That's what we want to do together with you, with each other, and across our locations as a community, and through our anchor causes and just through the lives that we live together. Does that mean that participation in Southridge's anchor causes is the only way to build God's kingdom? We've uniquely found the formula. No. We haven't got the inside scoop or the exclusive rights. We haven't figured that out. And that's not the intention. What we have, though, is a model through the life of Jesus that we're trying to lean into more closely with every teaching that we do and all of the moments that we sit together in life group together and have conversations about Jesus. And we're working to establish spaces, moments where we can actually sit together and create the opportunity to live our lives in a way that is one of the most vital and yet one of the most easily neglected building blocks of a life of discipleship in the ways that we extend that love to each other. Friends, Jesus loves us enough to invite us to participate with him, to be that foundation for us, and to allow us to build through in a way that looks not like an off-center chandelier, but actually looks in line with the good kingdom of God that's being built and that we're invited to participate in as well. So the invitation today is let's work together to learn how to build with the costly stones on the good foundation that is Jesus. Now, we're going to continue this conversation and to speak a little bit about what that looks like actually in our community here. And I just want to pray together, and then I'm going to invite Tom to come up and join me, and we're going to share a little bit more about how we're seeing that happening and the ways that we wonder about and are praying about God inviting us to as well. But let's pray together. Jesus, we thank you that you are good in every way, and more than we even understand. And that you are a good foundation, and that you invite us not just to know that, to believe that, or to witness it from a distance, but to participate in you, our good foundation, as a part of the building and ongoing act of creation that you are doing, that you invite us to be a part of. Lord, I thank you for this community and for the living and breathing embodied way that plays out right here in Welland, right out in the lives of the people in this room. And Jesus, we just pray that you would help us to be an encouragement and a wise discerners with each other as we learn how to do that together and increasingly build your kingdom with costly materials. We love you, Jesus. Amen.
We're going to shift formats here. Nate and I are going to have a bit of a conversation. But I just want to say, before we get into what we're going to get into now, what Nate has talked about is so core to the heart of who we are as a church that I just want to not miss the opportunity to say to you, if you have been part of our church for any amount of time, even if you're brand new, and you haven't yet plugged into some of the stuff that we do outside of Sunday mornings, things particularly like Harvest Kitchen on Friday night, although there are some other things that aren't just on Friday night. And I know maybe Friday night can be inconvenient, but the truth is what we do here at Harvest Kitchen ends by 7. You still have your whole evening and you've been fed. So it's not as inconvenient as it might seem. For us, we have little kids that we bring with us, and it's some of the best parenting we do in our week or in our month when we come here and get to expose them to different kinds of experiences and conversations. I really want to encourage you, and I want to say this as clearly as I can. If you are not participating in that kind of stuff, as much as Nate is right in saying that it's not like this is the only way to experience this stuff or that we have the market cornered, but if you're not engaging in this or some equivalent kind of experience of compassion and justice ministry, you are really missing out on the full experience of what it means to be a part of at least this church. And I believe you're missing out on the full experience of what it means to be a true disciple of Jesus. And so it's a big plug. I want to encourage you. It is an easy first step. Just come have dinner on Friday night with us some night. If you want to talk to me or talk to Amy Hand, we'd love to chat with you about what that could look like. And again, if Friday doesn't work, there are other opportunities to get plugged in. But in addition to the work that we have now been doing for years when it comes to trying to meet the need of people experiencing food insecurity and build some relationships with folks in our community, there has been another conversation that for some of us has been happening behind the scenes now for years in a way that we might not have even noticed. Or maybe you've heard little mentions here and there, but don't really have your head around what we mean when we have been talking about this affordable housing project that we've been thinking about, actually, frankly, since we acquired this building and property. Since the day that we acquired it, it has been in our hearts and minds to wonder what could be possible with the land just on this side of our building that we own. Could it be used by God to provide housing to those in desperate need of it, and create some new opportunities for us to do the very kinds of things that Nate was talking about. So this has been an active journey now for a long time. Nate, we're probably going to have to race through some of this, but you have been the one principally driving this work behind the scenes. Can you just give us a bit of a sense of what's been happening and why is this, I think we understand why it's a conversation, but what's actually been going into this?
Yeah, I mean, as we've been learning together as a community in the hands-on way that we connect on a Friday night, that's been a real learning for us to say, is affordable housing a need for us as a broader community? And I think the answer has been unequivocally yes. And in that ongoing relational way that we've been learning that, another question has been, could it make sense? Do we have some resources to offer to that conversation? And are we the type of community that could lean into that? And that's been some of the discernment that we're leaning into. Some of the questions have been, is it possible to use this land? And that's been an ongoing work for about 7 years to cut through all of the pieces of red tape and learn what that looks like. And we find ourselves in a place now where we've got some really good answers to what's possible and have worked through that, and have some really good partners who we've realized that to do something like this, you don't do it alone. You don't just try to come in here with good intentions and say, that'll be enough. Good intentions will save the day. That's not wise. Instead, it's who are the wise community partners that are around us who know what pieces are necessary, the pieces that we don't know how to do in terms of construction, in terms of being social workers, and in terms of the financial shape of all of this, and who are the external partners that can help with all of that and actually are eager for this conversation and for this kind of movement. And that's been the work that we've done over the last number of years to say, let's partner well, and then does this make sense for us as a community then, for the ways that we share meals together around tables? Is this the next step that would be really healthy for us and not overextend us or put us in a place that doesn't make sense?
So because some people are thinking about this maybe for the first time, You've mentioned a few of the things that are like, well, what about this? What about that? Let's start with the big, uncomfortable, ugly one. Let's talk a little bit about how on earth could we afford this?
Yeah.
Because this stuff isn't cheap. And as you already heard this morning, we're not exactly in a financial situation to have, wads of millions of dollars of cash to throw at something like this. So how on earth could this work financially?
Yeah, and so in this project, it's basically would cost about $8 million to do it holistically as a 28 unit build and all of the things that go to back that up and make sure it's sustainable and affordable.
So I want to invite everyone to get out your checkbooks.
Big ask today here. We realize that there are things that we have to contribute and there are things that we don't have to contribute. One of the things that we have to contribute, which we're going to talk more about, is just ourselves, who we are and weaving our lives. But we're not here saying, well, we have to do all of this. When it comes to the financial part of it, we do have a contribution. We have what's valued at about $1.3 million worth of land around us here. And when you go out the doors in the parking lot there and you can see the fields that we have there. And the idea is that that's a contribution from us. It's not insignificant, I think, as a community, even working our own way through our financial challenges to say, well, we'd like to, instead of monetizing that for our own purposes, instead we would be able to use that for the purposes of serving our community around us.
That land is like the loaves and fishes that we have. We have that. Now the question is, how does that get turned into something so much more than just that?
Yeah, that's a great way to put that. We didn't even plan that. That was really good. I like that. It is.
I've been planning for this for weeks. So.
You were just so on it. What a prepared guy. It's so true. It's you kind of put you kind of stick your neck out there, and then there's a responsiveness. And the idea is when we're there saying, "Hey, here's what we have," we're also recognizing that draws in other resources that allows us to then multiply that. We've seen that in our other locations at times, where when we offer this amount, then organizations and government is saying, "Oh, you're doing that. Can we resource you with this amount of money to keep doing that work and even to grow that?" And then you kind of work together with that. The idea here has been that there's about $6.5 million worth of construction and ongoing costs that need to happen that we're not intending to raise for ourselves. We can't do that. And what we've seen is that that's available in other ways. I'm going to talk about this a little bit at the end because it's going to be kind of one of the biggest prayer requests that we have right now. But what we realize is that money is actually out there. When you hear about government funding through, $30 billion for affordable housing and different areas that the government is saying, we have a crisis here, we need to do something about it. They're often being like, here's the money, can somebody do something about this? And they're looking for wise and discerning groups to speak into this, to step in so that money can be made available. And we've found ourselves in a place where the government has named, through Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, it's a federal program, have said, this is an excellent program. They have very specific metrics. And they said, you qualify actually not just in part for a loan and a grant and we'll do it together. They actually have very unequivocally said to us, you qualify for 100% funding because this is exactly what we need. And so the $6.5 million they've named and said, yep, you qualify for that funding. In a moment, we'll talk about the challenges that we've received in that, even within the last week and a half. But that's the space that we found ourselves funding-wise.
Yeah, so some of that is because the model that we've proposed is really good. Some of that is because of the credibility that we have as a community, because of some of the stuff that we already do, like in St. Catharines in our partnership with the region to operate homelessness services. The idea, though, is that the financial side of this would be entirely covered. Which is pretty spectacular, and yet I know that there's some things that we need to talk about that, some up-to-the-minute updates about that. The other thing that we talked about, if finances weren't necessarily a barrier to do this, certainly construction is an issue. If you've ever built anything like a house, you know that these projects are massive and there's so much creep. Talk about how we're not going to suddenly become a church about construction.
No, we are actually. That part of the beginning when I was saying who's a handy person here, that was actually a way to call you out and be like, this is on you now. No. Realizing again, there are professionals who do this and who have the same heart for saying, how do we increase the affordable housing in Canada? We've gone through, we spent a few years looking through different potential partnerships and honed in on one that's based, there's an organization called Axe Living. I actually don't know why they call themselves Axe, but they're based out of Thorold. And they're a really remarkable organization, great people, who are building homes in such a way that, thanks for putting that up, Brenda, It doesn't give everything, but just Axe is a construction partner who has a vast amount of experience, have a heart for actually building in such a way that's sustainable and actually trying to make this affordable. Really doing some unique kind of practices. These are engineers who have come from some big engineering companies who have said, I think we can do this stuff that are done on a large scale and we can do it more affordably. We've really grown to trust them over the last year and a half as we've gotten to know them, and they are 100% doing the construction. So when we talk about the funding that it costs to do this, the funding is able to pay for all the materials and the work and everything, and they do the work. And we'd be invited to participate if we want, for those of us who like to swing a hammer or lift a paintbrush, but the obligation's not on us. It's actually on Axe as a trusted partner.
Well, the cool thing is some of us have gotten the chance to do some like video conference calls with this organization. We've actually did an on-site tour, like a virtual tour, to see there's some amazing work that they do. And it's a pretty cool thing that actually would be a little bit out of sight, out of mind in a sense for us. I mean, it could entirely essentially be that. And it's been really neat to hear how they have reflected back to us just their sense of how cool it is that we would even be interested in doing something like this. And it has kind of turned into a bit of a sort of an unofficial kind of commitment from them to say, like, they are deeply invested in our success in this because it would prove to potentially create more and more opportunities for them. So they're highly motivated to work with us on this and kind of make this happen in a way that would be really good for us and not let creep kind of get in the way of us getting to the finish line. So, I mean, if this can happen financially without us, and this can get built without us, surely there's something for us to do. Talk to us about kind of some of the shared responsibilities when it comes to the social aspects of what this is, because obviously having people live on our property with coming from a variety of different experiences can present unique issues and challenges.
Absolutely, and it will, and that's definitely how that works, regardless of the shape of community. And we realize in this context that what we need is professional social workers who do this type of work. And fortunately, there are really wonderful organizations who do this. This is the work of their lives, to be able to lean into supporting folks with various challenges and be able to say, how do we make sure that you have housing available for you, you deserve housing and a dignified living, and to be supported. Some of us live in that way where you think about the ways that we lean into parents or friends or whatever kind of things start to happen as life starts to go skew, and the help that we receive. There are organizations who say not everybody has that exact same type of support, and some people need a bit more. Brenda, you can turn to slide 8 if you like. And one of the organizations that does this really well is called Bethlehem Housing. And Bethlehem Housing has been, or maybe just the previous one to that one even. Bethlehem Housing has been an organization that's been around since the 1980s, and this is the work that they do. They set up their own communities and they continue to build new communities and then support the folks living in those communities really well. There's such beautiful stories that come out of seeing lives woven in together and the ways that Bethlehem is able, through these workers who have the same heart for support, for dignity, and for just people to experience love in community, and the work that it takes to say, hey, you might have some different challenges here, but we're here to do that. And that's the work that they would be doing in partnership with us here as well. Even in other projects that they're building on their own, they've actually been looking for partners to be able to say, hey, who else is a part of this and wants to be building, and we can come in here and support you. And they've been really eager to see our community coming up with something that actually would fit in really well with exactly the type of work that they do. So
partnership sounds great, but it's still a little bit vague. What actually do they provide? What services would they add to what we're doing?
Absolutely. Brenda, do you want to turn to that next slide? You can see that some of the stuff that Bethlehem does is very specific to individual needs, the type of things like counseling and helping people to cope with various experiences or traumas that they've experienced in moments where people might be escalating some of the challenges and relationally, and being able to step in and actually do things about that, being able to meet with them in moments with our community in moments of crisis, being able to actually help be able to sort of plan goals and plan a future financially and socially in various ways like that. And basically there would be on-site staff support right here in our building for the community throughout the week, even in the evenings throughout. It's 24-hour support. So if somebody's experiencing a challenge in the middle of the night, then we have staff support who's able to come in and help with that. It's basically just being able to say 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, there's professional support, leaning into relationship and getting to know each other in the ways that we've gotten to know each other.
So like really, really specific things like property manager. That's not just maintenance and yard work, but actually partnering with people who would live here to make sure that they're budgeting and that their rent is going to be paid and all those kinds of things. Things like social workers to help anticipate and see and process maybe ways that things are getting off track and help that correct those things before they become problematic. These are real hands-on professionals who do this in an exceptional way. And so again, it begs the question, this can happen financially without us, this can happen construction-wise without us, and there are professional people built into the model who will do all of the social work and property management, take care of the rent, the financial side of things. All of that is sort of being handled by people who are not in this room. The real question then is, what is our role in this? And for me, this is all about expanding our capacity from what we're already doing on Friday nights and through things like Collective Kitchen or our community garden, expanding the playground with which we would be able to live in relationship with folks who are different from us, who give us the opportunity to be the community that is the cure that I mentioned earlier, to actually show up and in relationship, let the Spirit of God bring hope and healing in a way that would mutually bring all of us into a more mature and more full experience of the life in the presence of Jesus in us. That practically speaking, more than just serving a meal on Friday night, we could have other social experiences around here throughout the week. If, there's some people who want to do a euchre night, or to do all kinds of different things that, we have men's and ladies coffee, but they happen sort of only during work hours. Maybe we could expand that to have some things that more of us could participate in relationship to create an ongoing community where grace and love and hope lives. Because it lives in us, because Jesus lives in us. That's really what this is all about. And so all of the big scary stuff about how much it's going to cost millions of dollars, or all of creeping construction issues, or all of the, this is going to get really messy when we start being landlords. We are not interested in becoming full-time landlords. We are interested actually, and Nate has worked hard with lots of you and others to design this in such a way where all of those things that could become a distraction to what we are about as a church, that could become more hay, wood, and straw, even frankly, is stuff that we can actually outsource in a way that allows the foundation of Jesus to become the basis on which we build what is eternally valuable and what we can uniquely do as a community. And the invitation in question is, would we show up for that? If all that other stuff got done, would we show up in that kind of a way, open to the way that Jesus would want to increasingly build community here among us? Sort of an extension of what we've already been doing. It's not totally brand new, and yet it could be so much more and so much more beautiful. So at this point, unless you want to, you have one last thing you want to add.
Because we want to be able to lean into conversation with each other here and in the time that we have. But the last thing I want to say is, none of this is a given, and we do these things by faith. This is a part of our faith in Jesus and our trust in offering our resources. But it's also not just a given that, well, you know what, we've chosen to do this and this is how it's now going to work. And so I just wanted to name that even in the ways that there's been incredible barriers that have kind of fallen and opened up for this to happen, which a lot of times have felt a bit like that God has intervened and allowed this to be a possibility, has led us to the point where we are. The one barrier right now that really emerged even in the last 10 days is, and I'll just really quickly summarize it as this, with the way that, with our government changing, and with Keith Carney's government coming in, when governments change, sometimes programs change. And so the funding where we've been assured of $6.5 million, yes, you qualify, let's do this, is finishing now. And instead they're like, well, no, we're gonna roll another one out, they're gonna roll another, but it's different and there's no assurance there. And so in this way where we've been in partnership for some years, and Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation has been like, yep, you're in, just tick off these boxes and you'll get there, and 6.5 is there for you. Within 2 weeks, that program is done, the money is done, and we right now find ourselves in a position where they've said, oh, actually, yeah, maybe you won't get it after all. it's still possible, and then still God's going to do what God's going to do with this, and we're going to work really hard, and there's new funding that might come, but that, does that mean a few years from now, or does that mean that it is open for us? There are some questions there. And so for me, and just really openly and vulnerably, it's in God's hands, and we're just praying for God to do what God is going to do. And my personal prayer is definitely that this would, within the next 2 weeks, we'd find out somehow miraculously it still opened up and it worked. I think this could use your prayer, the prayers of discernment, and the prayers that God would show us some of that by revealing what's going to happen over these next few weeks. So just wanted to throw that out there with us as well, and just to name, this is an interplay between us and God, and we're trusting in God.
So we're going to keep you updated on that kind of stuff, probably through emails, so pay attention to those. And yeah, that's something that we desperately want, is your prayers. But right now, what I'd love to do is, first of all, can we just thank Nate? For context, Nate, as one of the pastors of our Vineland location, they had their own Hope Lives, and it's something he's also deeply invested in, and probably is in part grieving the missing out on that opportunity to be there in Vineland and invest in the Caribbean Workers Program that they invest in over there, but was so committed to this conversation that when I asked him if you could just come and be here with us instead, he was totally willing to do that. He has put a lot of work into this, and if you don't know about it or haven't seen it, just understand Nate Dirks has been loving this community and caring about us and investing in the future of what God might have in store for us behind the scenes in awesome ways. So let's just thank him again so much for his contribution. Thanks, Nate. So some of you may have noticed that we just delivered some Timbits to some tables. This is going to be an object lesson in inequity. No, here's what I'm going to ask, and it's a big ask, but I know that you guys are up for it. Okay, what I'd like us to do very briefly, before we wrap up our time today, is I want to actually give us a little bit of processing time at our tables. And because, I don't know exactly how everything is distributed here in terms of where we've sat, but what I would love to invite you is, if you're at a table that doesn't have Timbits, would you be brave enough to move to one that does? And the idea would be to make sure that we have people, not just who we came with at our table, but you can even break up and spread it. And we're going to have some very brief conversations together that I'm going to facilitate. So if you can just take a moment and go find a table that has Timbits on it and find a spot, that would be great. I know for some of you, you have been tracking with this conversation maybe even for years. This isn't your first time processing some of this, and you've got questions or thoughts or opinions about this. Maybe for some of you, this was a fire hose of what in the world? I had no idea this was going on. So it's okay. No matter where you're coming from today, your opinion matters, okay? We value that. And I will say, if you don't want to share your thoughts, you don't have to. There's no pressure here. But what I would love for every table to do is, you should have a piece of blank paper and something to write on, at least in the gray boxes, there's some writing stuff. Just assign one person to take some notes, okay? And if you have one person who can take some notes, here's what we're gonna do. I'm just gonna ask you 2 questions, okay? And I wanna encourage you just to share your thoughts, and there's nothing wrong with this, okay? There's nothing wrong with sharing, dissenting opinions or whatever. We're open to that. We just wanna hear from you guys what you're thinking. So we'll start with the easy question. The first question is more on the positive side of things, and I just simply want to ask us to reflect for a moment together on how this affordable housing project could enable us to better pursue our vision of being a Christ-like community. And I want to just state, for the absolute record, we are not trying to become a church that is focused on being landlords. We are not trying to become distracted by the kinds of things that could become distractions. We are only wanting to pursue things in this and all areas of ministry that help us become a more Christ-like community. That is our goal. That is our vision. That is never changing. And so the question would be, as you reflect on this, what ways could this help us become a more Christ-like community? Take a few moments and just share your thoughts on that. Okay, I'm going to just throw a second question on the screen. And if you can sort of shift gears from all of the really cool things this could enable us to do to be more a Christ-like community. The second question is, what are the questions, concerns, or ideas that you want to make sure that we are considering as we continue to discern this next step? I want to be clear. Nothing we've talked about today is a done deal. This isn't some backroom decision that's already been made. We are wanting to discern together as a community, and I've been in a number of meetings with Nate Dirks. Many of you have, and I'll tell you, I've been impressed by his openness, and not just openness to, but eagerness for challenging questions. And when people have said, hey, have you thought about this? I'm really nervous. I think this is a bad idea. And he has plumbed for more and more and more of that. A lot of those kinds of conversations are the very things that have shaped many of the changes and adaptations we've made to this process, to continue to make sure that we are accessing all of the wisdom and experience and knowledge in this room and beyond. So just take a moment. If there are questions you think we should be asking, or just things that you want to make sure get registered for us, those can turn into much longer coffees with Nate or with me. But just take a moment and share those things, and don't be afraid. It's okay. You can ask tough questions. Okay, well, for the sake of time, I'm gonna kind of invite you to wrap it up. But if you still have some things you want to make sure get written down, make sure you write those down. Grab the piece of paper, and you can do that. We definitely want to get all of this information. And this doesn't have to be your only opportunity. We'd love to chat with you more about this, okay? This isn't the end of the process. We're still in the middle of things. But as we wrap up our time, I want to invite us to join in and sing this song together. And you can go either back to your spots, or you can stay with your new best friends. And let's sing this out as a vision of what God may want to do here among us in this way.